Quadratic formula. Calculator is super important. It does most of the work for us. Okay, we have steps. Your midterm has one multiple choice and it has one free response. Both of them use the quadratic formula. The first one will have real solutions, the multiple choice, and the second one will have imaginary solutions, the free response. Reminder, multiple choice, we are only looking at the answers you select, none of your work. Good things and bad things come along with that. Your free response, we will look through all your work, and you will be graded based on your understanding. Just because you get an incorrect answer does not necessarily mean you get a 0 on it. Okay? You can do a lot of great things, miss one little thing, and get most of the points still. So start getting used to showing all your work. Okay, you have a little cheat sheet of your 5 steps for quadratic formula that we've been doing. We got 2 examples today to crank through, and then you got problems on the back to practice. So example number 1, 2x squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. It's equal to 0, so we're ready to go. And just as a reminder, this cannot be factored. Okay, you can't factor this. So our next step then is if you need to solve a quadratic and you can't factor it, then you have to use a quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Do you need to have this memorized? Absolutely not. You have that cheat sheet that we gave you yesterday. The quadratic formula is right on that sheet. There's no need to have that memorized. Okay? But you need to know what it is used for, and it's used for solving quadratics. So our step number 1 in red, identify your A, B, and C, just like we did yesterday during factoring. In this example, A is 2, B is negative 8, and C is 7. Okay? Just like we did yesterday. Be very careful. Always look at what's in front of the number. Is it a plus sign? Is it a positive number? Or is it a minus? Is it a negative number? Little details in math change the entire problem. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is where most students make mistakes. And it's weird because all we're doing is plugging A, B, and C into the appropriate spots. So we have 2 B's, 2 A's, and 2 C's, or 1 C in our formula. Just make sure they get in the right spot. The best practice, the way to make sure no mistakes happen is to write out the quadratic formula with blanks wherever there is an A, B, or C. That way you can just put your number in and your parentheses will be there and be ready to be put in the calculator. So negative b parentheses plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, best practice, just write it out. Put parentheses wherever a number needs to be plugged in. Now here, take your time, double, triple check. You want to make sure your values are in the correct spot. Our first 2, we're going to plug in our A. We got an A after the 4, which is 2, and an A value in the bottom after the 2. So there's my A values plugged in. My B value is negative 8, so let's make sure we plug in a negative 8 in both B spots. These are the first 2 blanks. Okay, be very careful. The quadratic formula already has a negative at the start. So when I plug in that negative 8, it's negative 8. Don't forget that negative. And then finally, my C value is at the top, at the very end. There's only one of them, and it was 7. Okay, that is step 2. We have found our A, B, and C, and we have plugged in our A, B, and C. From here, our calculator can do most of the work. We just need to use it to simplify each of our parts. Now, there are like 3 main parts you want to put in your calculator to simplify. You want to make sure you simplify the first term, this negative 8. We want to figure out what everything under the square root is equal to. And we want to simplify the denominator. Okay, so step 3 is cleaning up. Simplify what's under the radical. So I'm going to plug in each one of these. Just to be super safe, we're taking a midterm worth of chunk of our semester grade. I want to double check. Negative 8. negative, negative 8. When I plug that in, I get positive 8. Okay? Let's start rewriting my quadratic. X equals positive 8 plus or minus. I need to figure out what all of that under the square root is equal to. And I'm going to be very careful and plug in all my parentheses. Negative 8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7. I typed it in exactly the same way as how I wrote it. I click enter. All of that is equal to 8. Everything I highlighted under the square root is just 8, so I just need to write an 8 right here. And then when I do my denominator, I know 2 times 2 is 4 again, but something that is worth 20% of my grade, I'm going to take 2 seconds and just type it in. Make sure I'm not going crazy. Yeah, 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to put 4 on the bottom. Okay, that is steps 1, 2, and 3. By step 3, you should be less overwhelmed, because step 2 looks pretty awful. Okay. Not the hardest part, but I think the part students dislike the most is simplifying the square root. Okay? The square root of 8 is not simplified. We need to simplify this as much as we can. Square root of 8. When we simplify square roots, remember, you are trying to figure out which perfect square from your list on your cheat sheet can you divide 8 by. Okay? It has to be smaller than 8, which means it can only be 4. It has to be 4. And when we divide 8 by 4, we get 2. So this will just split up into square root of 4 times the square root of 2. 4 times 2 is 8. Again, I don't want to split this into 8 and 1. That would do nothing for us. 4 and 2. We're doing this because the square root of 4 is a regular old 2. The square root of 8 simplifies to just 2 times the square root of, why did I write an 8? Should be yelled at me. 2. 2 square root of 2. Okay, so we're going to replace what we wrote with 2 square root of 2. So x equals 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 over 4. There's steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now it is almost perfect. This is a great answer. It's just not a perfect answer. What's keeping this from being a perfect answer? I can divide each of my 3 terms by 2. I have 3 terms. I have an 8, I have a 2 root 2, and I have a 4. All of those are even numbers, and I can divide all of them by 2. So this last step, I'm dividing out a 2 from all of my terms. So x equals 4 plus or minus 1 square root of 2, or you can just write the square root of 2, over 2. This right here is a perfect answer for me. And that is the quadratic formula. This had 2 real solutions. Remember, one of our solutions is 4 plus the square root of 2 over 2. The second solution is 4 minus the square root of 2 over 2. That is 2 separate answers, but we just write them together. Okay? We're going to do another one. Okay, the next one is exactly the same. The only difference is we will have imaginary solutions, but our process is exactly the same. So example 2. 4x squared equals 2x minus 1. How's this one a little different? There's something we need to do before we can even do step 1. Our first problem was equal to what? Is this one equal to 0? No, we just gotta move some terms. Okay? If I draw my line down my equal sign, I want to move everything to the left side. So how do I move 2x over to the left? Subtract it. Subtract 2x on both sides. So I have 4x squared minus 2x equals -1. It's still not equal to 0, so I have to move the -1 over also. How do I move -1 to the left? Add 1. So 4x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Now my quadratic is all equal to 0. Now this does make a difference. If you try to do your ABC at the beginning, you'd have 4, 2, and -1. But after moving in, now it's 4, -2, and +1. So it does make a difference. Make sure all your terms are on one side. Okay, now we go through the same 5 steps, exactly like we just did. Okay, first we identify our A, B, and C. Give us a little bit more room. A equals 4, B equals -2, and C equals 1. Okay? A, B, C. Tokar. Yeah. Yep. Well, never behind the 1. Okay, so second step is we need to plug everything into the quadratic formula. Again, most mistakes happen here, which is crazy, but it's just because we don't take our time. -b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Now all we need to do is plug in our a, our b, and our c's into the correct spot. My a value is 4, so those go after the 4 and after the 2. My b is -2. That's my first 2 spots. -2, -2, and 1 at the end. Okay. Always double, triple check. Yep, got my a's in the right spot. I got my 2 b's at the start, my c at the caboose at the end. We are all good. They're in the right spot. So step 3 is now just simplifying my 3 parts. Okay, I'm just going to double check because it's kind of a big deal that I get this part correct. So -2 becomes +2. Good. X equals 2 plus or minus the square root. I'm going to plug everything under the square root exactly as I wrote it. -2 squared. A lot of students forget the square, don't forget it. Minus 4 times 4 times 1. Exactly as I wrote it. Click enter, and we get -12 this time. And on the bottom, I'm pretty sure 2 times 4 is 8, but I'll take a couple seconds to just double check. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 in the denominator. Okay, steps 1, 2, 3. A, B, C, plug them in. Use my calculator to simplify my 3 parts. Okay, now it's the part we all love best. It is simplifying the square roots. We need to simplify the square root of -12. And here's where this problem just has one tiny difference. That number inside the square root is negative. We can't simplify a negative square root until I do what with that negative? Put an imaginary out front. I square root of +12 now. Okay? The only difference is when we simplify the square roots, I have an I. You can't take the square root of a negative number with real numbers, so we need to make sure, hey, this is imaginary. So I put that I out front, and I write a positive 12. Now, just like we did before, the number 8 could be divided by 4 and be split into 4 and 2. What can we split 12 into? One of our numbers must be perfect square. 4 and 3, right? I wouldn't ever want to do 6 and 2, because 6 and 2 are both not perfect squares. I want to split it into a perfect square. So I have I root 4 root 3. I root 4 root 3. Remember that I is still there. The square root of 4 is 2. So if I'm not going to write I2, it's correct to write 2I. Square root of 3. So this whole thing simplifies to x equals 2 plus or minus 2I root 3 all over 8. All over 8. Last but not least, this answer it's good. It's a good answer. It's not quite perfect. Because we have 3 terms, a 2, a 2I root 3, and an 8. That is 3 different terms. And we divide out anything from all 3 terms. 2. And remember, you have to be able to divide it out from all 3, and if you can't, then you're just done. So we can divide out a 2. Okay, after we divide out a 2, we get 1 plus or minus 1I, or just I, root 3, over 4. This is perfect. And you're done. Okay, that's the quadratic formula. We did one with real solutions, one with imaginary. And that is exactly what you'll be doing on your quiz or midterm. Just remember one